Today's edition of the Sunday Times features a major investigation into the cladding scandal exposed by the Grenfell Tower fire. Monday was the 4th anniversary of that tragedy that killed 72 people. Now, 4 years on, many families are facing ruinous bills to make safe buildings wrapped in flammable materials. It's believed that 1.3 million flats around Britain are unmortgageable. Martina Lees is behind the investigation and joins us now. Martina, good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, Martina, it's a tremendous investigation you've done, so congratulations on that and for bringing light to what has been, a true scandal. So talk us through what you've discovered.
I've spent the last month speaking to people who have had real bills or estimates of what it will really cost to fix their buildings. And it's just been shocking. Several of the people, their bills are going to cost more than they paid for their flat. So this is now 4 years on after Grenfell. And I mean, so far, a lot of the numbers we've heard were just kind of guesswork, but these are the real numbers. And the humanity of it is just shocking. So on the front page today, we have a picture of little Ella Harris. She's 4 years old in Manchester. And her father, Matthew, got a bill of £102,000 to fix their home. And he only paid £88,000 for that flat. And he's an NHS laboratory worker earning about 22 grand a year. So for him, he said he nearly threw up when he got the bill. There's another lady called Rachel Loftus up in Leeds, and she got an MBE this month from the Queen for her services in the pandemic. And in the same week, she got an estimate for £412,000 to fix her building, and her flat's only worth £90,000. So it's just staggering. The average bills is that what leaseholders really have to pay, the people who innocently bought these flats, are £14,000 in buildings that are tall. And that's not funded by the government's £5.1 billion of money. And in smaller buildings, you have to pay on average £27,000 for things, not just the cladding, but other things too, like balconies or flammable insulation, and the list goes on and on and on.
Martina, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government spokesman there released a statement. They say, "We entirely reject these speculative figures based on a tiny sample of buildings. All buildings eligible for the Building Safety Fund will be funded to remove defective or missing cladding barriers if it's part of an unsafe cladding system." So essentially what they're saying is, the cladding that needs to be looked at and replaced, they're going to be receiving the money from the Building Safety Fund. So other people that you have spoken to, have they been contacted and reassured that that money is not going to come out of their pocket?
Well, none of the people I've spoken to will have their full bill covered. There are people like Matthew Harris, Ella's father, who, his building is smaller than 18 meters, and because of that, he doesn't qualify for a grant from the fund. So the government has said there's going to be a loan scheme to fund bills for those buildings, but that's about 2 years off, and he got his bill now. And also, the government has said that scheme is going to have a £50 a month cap on payments, which sounds great. But when you do the maths for Matthew Harris's bill, just the interest on that loan, because it's not interest-free, it's going to be low interest, that will be £80 a month, which means that loan will never be paid off. It will just get bigger over time. So, and how is that fair? And all the funding, both the loans and the grants, will only cover the cladding portion of the bill. It doesn't cover things like balconies and other defects like fire doors, and it's really complex. The moment you take off the cladding and you look inside the walls and in the rest of the building, there are usually just a catalogue of defects, and not all of it's funded.
Well, Martina, stay on the line because we've got some case studies joining us.
Yes, we're joined by William Martin, a junior doctor from Sheffield, who co-founded the End Our Cladding Scandal campaign, and Sarah Rennie from Birmingham. William, tell us about your situation first.
My situation, so I've got a flat in Sheffield that I bought 5 years ago, and about a week after Grenfell, we discovered we got the same type of cladding as Grenfell. And since then, my life's been entirely on hold. We've subsequently discovered that we've got, as Martina was saying, a catalogue of other problems in the building. We have gained funding for the ACM cladding, but there remains an estimated £6.2 million worth of work, which isn't funded by any government fund, which is being asked currently for leaseholders to pay, like myself, which weights at about £52,000 each.
Wow.
Work is underway to remove the cladding on the building, but when the cladding is actually removed off my building, it will still, ironically, remain unsafe and unsellable. So, it's just a horrific situation, and it has now just consumed my life for the last 4 years.
And when you say unsellable, I mean, what are your options at the moment?
There are no options. There really are no options. At best, it's a cash sale at auction, but that's not even happening at most of these buildings. And I would definitely be in negative equity then if I were to do that. So I just have to unfortunately sit out and wait, and I've been waiting for so long now. And of course, whilst all this wait's going on, you've got that huge mental health strain that is just continual about living with this unsafe building, and those worries that go through your mind about all of the recent fires that we've seen, in London, New Providence Wharf and elsewhere. So, yeah.
It sounds so hard. And Sarah, I understand you use a wheelchair and you're living in an adapted home. What's the impact been on you?
I bought my flat when I graduated because I needed somewhere to adapt that would be accessible for me to live with my care assistants in a safe way. So it's got lots of equipment and adaptations. And the plan for me, I made what I thought was a really sensible financial plan. Because my condition will, deteriorate, I'm not going to be able to work full time as a typical person would. So the plan, I worked to pay off my mortgage so that I could work less and become healthy and as long as possible. And unfortunately, with these bills coming in, this year alone, my share of just service charge, just the operational costs of things like the insurance and the waking watch is just shy of £700 a month. So I have no chance of decreasing my workload. I have to keep going out there and earning, and it's really exacerbating my physical disability.
And are you getting any support to help you with this?
For the cladding, and it's only the cladding, we are hopeful of a partial grant. It won't cover everything, but we haven't had a penny. So for months, the bills are going out, still paying towards the insurance and everything. We haven't seen a penny. There's delays in decision, lack of procedure in the fund, and it's all falling on leaseholders for our building, about £1,600 a day just to keep the building open.
That's phenomenal. And William, you've founded this campaign group, End Our Cladding Scandal. Why is it all falling on the residents? Why aren't the companies who built the buildings, why aren't they stepping up? Or insurance companies? Why are residents having to bear the burden?
Well, that's the question that we've been asking from day one. We're 4 years on, and still the book seems to just be stopping with the people who have absolutely no responsibility in this and who played no part in building these unsafe buildings. We have continually said to the government that they need to hold those responsible fully to account. They've announced a levy on the developers. It doesn't even touch the sides. It's not enough. The innocent people here are being made to pay, and you can imagine why the government doesn't want to penalise developers, but it's just so frustrating that they refuse to step up to the table and address the scale of this problem. And I think one of the other things that's just been mentioned there about is, we focus a lot on cladding, it's the cladding scandal, but it goes well beyond that. And the government know that, and they continue to gaslight the public and tell the public that it is, 90-odd% of buildings have now been remediated or started work on. All of that is absolute rubbish. There are so many buildings out there that have got problems that go well beyond cladding, mine included, and we just don't seem to talk about that, and they seem to just want to brush that under the table, and they don't seem to want to go after the people who are responsible.
And Sarah, you talked a bit about having to work more. There's clearly the financial burden is a real stress. Are you also worried about living in a building that clearly isn't safe? What impact?
Yes, everybody is worried about that, whether particularly people that can't self-evacuate. That's a huge problem for people. But also, the defects that Will mentioned, the government has no plan for that, and that financial cost coming our way is keeping us awake at night. What we're finding is that developers have either gone bust, they've conveniently dissolved, or they're relying on limitation clauses, so saying that any claims we've got are time barred. How did we know that the internal walls, how would we know that there would be problems? So the whole system and the way that the government are framing this, they're sending us to the original parties knowing we have no recourse.
I'm so sorry. It sounds so difficult.
Well, just to add on to that, the fact of the matter is that leaseholders cannot pay. That we just cannot pay. These sums of money are too big. And so ultimately what you have is a situation where my building will remain unsafe. And so the events that we saw 4 years ago will repeat themselves, and more lives will be lost. And they have repeated themselves. There was a fire at New Providence Wharf. The London Fire Brigade concluded that it was actually the timber balconies that contributed to the fire, but there's no financial assistance for balconies. So, we are going to be in a situation whereby another fatal fire happens, and, who's responsible for that? Because it's certainly not us.
That really is an alarming warning. Thanks both so much for telling us about what's going on. That's William Martin from Sheffield and Sarah Rennie in Birmingham.
Now, Martina Lees, who wrote the headline article in the Sunday Times, is still with us. Martina, a couple of questions have come in from listeners whilst we've been talking about this. Regarding the cladding, surely the companies that installed and managed the building should be paying and replacing. Why is the government and the taxpayer footing the bill? Just don't understand.
We'll touch on that. The law is that developers are only liable to fix defects in the first 6 years after it's discovered. And a lot of these buildings were built long before that. So also, developer companies often have gone bust. And in the case of the cladding and the insulation, there's also the fact that the regulations were boiled down over the years, and a lot of the stuff was legally allowed on buildings. So there's a part of it that was the rules were wrong, and there's a part of it, the rules that were there, building regulations on fire breaks, for example, that were broken because of shoddy construction, but it falls outside the time limit. So many of these new build flats had warranties, but that's run out as well. And the freeholders, who are the real building owners, they also didn't know when they bought the building that it was unsafe. So it's the only people that are legally liable under leasehold law are the leaseholders, and they can be made to pay, but no one else can be made to pay easily.
Another text here from Fran. She says there is a lack of fire stopping in virtually every building in the last 20 years. Buildings signed off in self-certification and by the National House Building Council. Knowingly missing fundamental safety requirements is a criminal neglect. So why aren't the police involved? or the Crown Prosecution Service. Martina, do you think that we will see criminal investigations in some of these cases?
I haven't seen any yet. So that's a good question. Because of what I explained, it's really hard to pin blame on developers or anyone else involved in the construction. So, I mean, even in the case of Grenfell, we still haven't seen any prosecutions. There is a police investigation, but we will see arrests, if there are any, only after the Grenfell inquiry concludes. So I am not holding my breath.
Martina, thanks for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. Martina Lees there, who has written the article all about the cladding scandal. You can read the investigation in today's Sunday Times, pick up a copy or subscribe to the Times and the Sunday Times by going to times.radio/subscribe. Now, Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government spokesman has said, we entirely reject these speculative figures based on a tiny sample of buildings. All buildings eligible for the Building Safety Fund will be fully funded to remove defective or missing cladding barriers if it's a part of an unsafe cladding system.